Well, I want to thank all of you for watching Boys State and joining me and this excellent group to discuss the film and the future of American politics. I'm truly honored to be here tonight with all of you. I am so pleased to have my dear friend, Governor Larry Hogan of Maryland, there. And as you know, he's Maryland's 62nd governor and is serving in his second term. I'm also happy to welcome Ben Feinstein, who we all just saw in the film. He is currently studying at Southern Methodist University. And finally, I'm honored to introduce filmmakers Amanda McBaine and Jesse Moss. It truly was an excellent documentary, and I'm looking forward to discussing it with all of you. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I appreciate everyone being here.
Thank you.
So I guess, go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much for hosting this conversation. It's an honor to be here with you.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. I can't thank you enough for letting me participate in this, Mr. McCain. This has just been, I'm very thrilled to be here. I'm anxious to have a great conversation.
Well, I actually I watched the documentary before I was asked to do this. So it was quite timely, and I thought it was fascinating. I loved it. I thought it was really good. So this is exciting to be here. So shall we just dive right in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead.
I just said, yeah.
Okay. All right, good. This question is for everybody. How important is it to teach the importance of civic education and emphasize the tenets of democracy to students at a formative age? And do you also think it is a focus in American education today? Governor, would you like to go first?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you again very much for letting me be a participant in this. And I want to thank everybody here for anything they had to do with this film. I think it was terrific the way the film was done. Ben, you're a movie star, and I'm happy to be here with you as well. I think it really was something that more people should watch, because it really gives you a look into what it was like behind the scenes at Boys State and this great program that the American Legion puts on. I think it's critically important that we do more to teach young people about democracy and how our political process works, and get them interested at an early age. And I didn't have the chance to go to Boys State, but I was saying that I got involved early in politics as a teenager in high school and in college. And I did get a chance to do some internships at the state legislature, but I was a little jealous watching the film that I didn't get a chance to participate in Boys State, because it was incredible to see these young men who really restored my faith in the future, because we have people like this that do care about democracy and do care about public service and want to get involved. So I'm just thrilled to be here with the rest of you.
Wonderful. Amanda or Jess, would you like to comment?
I mean, neither Jesse or I knew about the Boys and Girls State programs before. We didn't go through it as when we were growing up in California. But when we read about this program in 2017, I think that we were very excited to learn there was this space that the American Legion, the Texas Boys State created, where people from very different political points of view came together face to face at the age of 17 and were forced to talk politics. And I think that as filmmakers, that was an exciting space for us to visit, knowing that it could be fraught, but also that it could provide for us some surprises about what we might see when we get there. And that's certainly what we saw when we got there.
And I think we're maybe 2 decades removed from the classroom, but I can think of nothing more important than civic education. We're the parents of 2 daughters, and we're watching them grow up in this world and learn about how the system of democracy works, and not only how the system works, but what their role in it is, and how we teach that seems to be one of the most important things we can give our young people. And what kind of education is that? I think the classroom component is really important, but also how do you connect with the system? What's the role you're going to play? And I think this program helps young people find their voice, find their role. And I think thinking about this isn't the only program that does that, but I think it's a tremendous value. And I hope that this film doesn't say this is the answer for everybody, but let's have a conversation about how young people can learn by doing, learn by trying on these roles and these and sort of confronting tough questions. So,
yeah, thank you, Ben.
I couldn't agree more with what's been previously said. And I think one of my greatest blessings is that I went to a school with an absolutely fantastic government teacher, Dr. Caraway. And there's the JFK quote, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And I think now more than ever, that's extremely relevant. I think embodying that principle in our education and embodying the principle of, democracy isn't cheap, democracy isn't free. Democracy isn't something to be taken for granted. And there's certain norms and certain standards that we need to uphold in our system and that each of us have a role in doing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's vital for the future health of it because ultimately the system relies on us.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, this next question is also for all of you. Throughout the documentary, many of the high school age participants shared opposing ideas, but continued to engage in civic debate. My husband knew that however sharp our differences, however intense and in temperament our political debates can be, they should not prevent us from respecting each other. How do you think this program, like these programs like Boy State, can help teach the principles of civic discussion and respect for political rivals? That's a very timely question. I'll start with you, Governor.
Well, first of all, let me just say, I've long been a huge admirer of your husband and the way he went about politics and his entire career. He not only was he obviously committed to public service throughout his life, but he really was a perfect example of putting his country above him personally or the party. He always was willing, he was a guy who was willing to stand up and fight for what he believed in, but he also really never hesitated to reach across the aisle. He conducted himself with civility, and it's really what's missing in politics today. And I've tried to do the best I could to emulate leaders like your husband. From throughout my career, I've really tried to focus on finding that middle ground where we can all come together, trying not to demonize the other side and to have a more civic debate. And I think that we saw that in the film, that these young people were working together in a bipartisan way. And even though Ben was working hard for his party, he showed tremendous respect for the other guys on the other side. And I think we as grown-up politicians and leaders could learn a lot from these young people, frankly, because I thought it was really encouraging to see the way that they worked in a bipartisan way and in a civil debate.
Right. Amanda?
I think very early on in this project, I knew that we were onto something special because I fully expected the American Legion and the Texas Boy State leadership to honestly not take my phone call. I was calling from San Francisco. I'm a documentary filmmaker. They had gotten a little bit of negative press coverage because of the secession vote the year earlier. At Texas Boy State, the legislature had voted to secede from the union, which is how we kind of found out about this program. But to their credit, they took my phone call, and that started a very long conversation that was incredibly profound about our country and the overlap of our sort of deep care for the country, but also interest in how polarization had trickled down to this next generation. And wanting to investigate that in an honest and immersive way ended up being a project they wanted to do with us. And, that's something that I value dearly. And that conversation, I think, even from the beginning, made me understand that there is, in fact, hope for everyone, let alone even before I met the four guys who we followed, who for me are just extraordinary in all their ways. And their continued conversation, by the way, since the filming was done, has been incredibly enriching, as different as they are politically.
Yeah. Ben?
I think it's a very timely question, and I think it speaks to one of the program's greatest strengths, which was, you know, everyone is put in a common system. You're sharing a room with someone from the other party. You're playing sports with them. You're walking to programs with them. You're all hearing the same speakers speak about, you know, the value of democracy, the value of patriotism. Yeah, the focus of the documentary was the elections, but Boy State is a lot more than just elections. And the reason why it fostered such positive civic engagement and such positive bipartisanship is precisely because we were all put in a similar system. And at the end of the day, you know, regardless of if the nationalist or the federalist won, we were all still Boy Staters. We were all still Texans. We were all still Americans.
Yeah.
And I think fostering that common sense of a community outside of the political process is hugely important.
Yeah. All right, I'd like to narrow down a little bit, and if I can come to you first, Governor Hogan. One of the most important outputs of the Boy State program is the development of a cohort of young civic leaders. Did you have any eye-opening experiences like Boy State that continued to your personal leadership and development? If they worded a little bit differently here, but what is there anything that helped you further along your belief in the system and how you conduct yourself?
Well, I really wish that I had the opportunity to attend Boy State, and I did not.
Mm-hmm.
I had a role model in my dad, who was a member of Congress in the 70s, and he served on the Judiciary Committee during the impeachment of Nixon, and so I learned a lot about public service and integrity from my dad, and looking to leaders like your husband, who I followed forever and supported. But I, as a young person, I got involved when I was maybe 10 years old in politics, and was in teenage Republicans and college Republicans. I was a chairman of Youth for Reagan, and
oh, wonderful.
So getting involved.
You were involved.
Yeah, I was. I was just really young. I was in high school and college, but I was still just as committed and passionately wanted to be involved in public service, and so I learned the campaigns. But I think it was, I wish I had Ben's experience. He was a party chair, and ran these great campaigns, and it was a neat experience. But I didn't have exactly the same experience, but getting involved in a young age, I think is critically important, and a lot of our younger people do not get that experience, and so that's why I think this program and the Boy State effort that the American Legion does is so wonderful.
Well, I'm sure that you're seeing as well, if I can follow up, at least we are out here in Arizona, a little bit of lessening of civic education. And it's not being promoted or taught as much, or if at all, in some schools. And from a personal standpoint, I think that's tragic. I think this should be one of the first things we talk about and discuss, especially in high school.
I absolutely agree, and that's why I think it was funny, Amanda, when you said that you were calling from San Francisco, and you were surprised. I'm surprised I didn't just block the call and not pick up. Hollywood producers calling these folks at the American Legion. But I think that's why it's so great, because we need to have more civic learning. I think, Ben, you and all of your 1,000 or so colleagues that went to Boy State in Texas must have learned a heck of a lot, and you could see that. But I'm not sure everybody, as Mr. McCain was saying, we don't have enough of that in our high schools today, and it's something we really need to work on improving, because you guys are the future leaders of the country, and if we don't teach the basics of democracy, we're going to be in real trouble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Ben, this one's for you. It's been 2 years since the film was made, and you've seen yourself on the big screen. Exciting. What are some of the most important takeaways/lessons that will help carry you forward from Boy State?
I think the greatest luxury, being involved in this project has afforded me is that very few people, especially people my age, get the opportunity to look at their actions, with a mirror, without the rose-tinted glasses of nostalgia and the fog of war and everything, and see, for better or worse, this is how it was. And there's a ton of moments from the film that I can look back on and say, I'm really proud of that. Or I remember this guy, we had a great time. Or I remember this moment, the excitement. But there were also moments when I look back and, I say, okay, maybe I shouldn't have reacted this way. Okay, maybe I shouldn't have let my emotions get to me this much. okay. And it's very, very important, speaking with the clarity of hindsight, that, especially if you're in that high pressure of a situation, but really in anything you do, especially politically, it's very important. And I think your husband understood this, to view the other person as a person and not just as an opponent.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think I met Stephen Garza one time there. Obviously Renee Otero and I weren't on the best of terms by the end. And I knew Robert from outside Boise State, but we didn't have a chance to reconnect. And as a result, I didn't really get to know any of those people at the program.
Yes.
And I saw them as opponents far more so than, as actual people.
Right.
And, if Boise State had the shadow of the future, if it were, if we actually had to maintain a functioning government, it would have been considerably harder to do had we not considered them other people.
Yeah.
You got to work with your opponents, and there's got to be a basic
Yeah. That's a good lesson. That's a good takeaway from that, because as you know, in recent times, we've had difficulties working together. And it's civil and civic action is most important, but civil and putting country first, in my opinion, is a main goal for all of these types of things like Boise State and others. Okay, Amanda and Jesse, I have one for you. The themes of civility, democratic action, and voting are played out in the documentary, seem to be at the forefront of our news cycle as well. How did the current state of politics play into your making of the documentary, and why did you decide to document Boise State?
Well, I think we recognized when we embarked on this project that democracy is fragile. And we also felt that a lot of people are tuning out. They're siloed. Maybe what they hear and read in the news turns them off, which we understand. And we wanted to find a way to, first for ourselves, but hopefully for our audiences, to kind of bring them back into the process and this conversation that we're having about what civil discourse looks like and why it's important. And I think we thought with this story and with young men like Ben, we could find a way to kind of bring people into the conversation that wasn't sort of the same old frequency that we hear, maybe we tune out. And I think that's, we talked about the need for civic education. Not everybody's going to have the chance to go to Boise State or Girl State. And one thing we've been able to do with our partners at Apple and A24 is develop a curriculum for high school kids around this film. So if you can't go to Boise State or Girl State, but you still want to talk about these issues and you want to learn from this experience, here's a way to do that. And we think hopefully that's a way to sort of continue this conversation going forward.
Wonderful. You are exactly right. Governor, this one's for you. As we turn to the 2020 election, the democratic practices demonstrated in the Boise State documentary will be realized in our national elections. What do you think we can learn from the young men's experience as we turn to November?
Well, it's an excellent question. Obviously, I believe that the divisive politics that we have today, we've really gotten away from the way things used to be and the way things should be. And but I was very hopeful in watching the film and seeing these young men. I really do think that they had a more civil dialogue than we do in our campaigns today. Both in the presidential campaign that's coming up in just a short period of time, but all of our politics has gotten to be where there's too much demeaning the other side and name calling, and it seems like people are more interested in winning arguments than actually coming up with common sense bipartisan solutions to the serious problems. And, I really want us to have a more civil debate in America. I believe in the two-party system and the competition of ideas, but the way we're going about it is not helpful at all. And we've got to, after this election's over with, take a close look at how we're going to become better. And I think we could learn from these young men. I'll joke with Ben that there were a few times they threw a few punches, and they were learning from the adults about how to do some bare knuckle politics.
How to misbehave.
but they also they really did seem to be friendly when they got off the stage, and that's the way it used to be in politics. I know when my dad was in Congress in the 70s, and they would passionately debate on the floor, and then they'd go have dinner together, have a beer together.
Exactly.
Now the other side is an enemy that you have to destroy, and that's not the way it should be.
No, it's not. I completely agree. You're exactly right. Ben, for you, the documentary depicts a lot of important scenes involving voting. But what can you say about the behind the scenes mechanisms of democracy from your Boy State experience? And does this give you confidence in the American democratic system?
It does give me confidence and it doesn't. I'll say this. As someone who ran, granted it was like a very limited simulation, and to say that my experience is analogous to like real politics is a vast overstatement. But in my experience, I found that the system is what we make it. The beauty of free speech and the beauty of free elections and the beauty of the system being the way it is, where it's highly responsive to the needs and wants of the people, is that we can either play to our better angels like the founding fathers wanted, or we can go low. And there were times when, every candidate, did one or the other, or, combined both in some way. And that's just how it is. And, as someone whose strategy, to build on what Governor Hogan was saying, like we weren't afraid to, throw some punches, and we were aping the adults in that sense. It worked in certain respects. There were times when it went too far, and there were there's one particular scene where some rogue delegates made a racist profile about, Renee Otero, and that's absolutely not okay. There's times when it can go too far, and there's times, when we shouldn't indulge in that. But the reality of the system is that it's not going to be clean all of the time, and that's just the way it is. But what does give me optimism is that, if both sides decide we're not going to go low, we're, going to treat the other person with respect, values that we're not going to give up, that's how it will work, because that's, it's a very optimistic kind of naive view. I truly think that's how it is. So,
well, does it disappoint you that all too often right now in our own government that people are putting party before country instead of country before party?
It does, and I think a huge problem with that mindset is I think that we've infused politics and morality a lot. And a story that I often keep in mind, I'd be telling this story even if I were not talking to, you as, Mrs. McCain. But, in the 2008 election, there was an instance when a voter at a town hall called Obama, oh, he's a Muslim terrorist, whatever. And, John McCain said to his credit, like, he's my opponent, but he's still a good American, and we're not going to talk about it today.
Right.
And yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about keeping, the morality of an individual and their views separate. And I think that leaders on both sides have been far too willing to blur that line for the sake of short-term victories today, and we're seeing the consequences of that.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Ben, because I was so proud of John McCain at that moment, and that is lacking in our politics today.
Yeah, it was an amazing moment for sure. Being there and watching it, it was an amazing moment. And as you know, John totally believed what he was saying, and he meant it.
Totally.
So it was wonderful. Amanda and Jesse, knowing a little something about politics and political campaigns, you don't often allow outsiders into the heart of the campaign. But you were allowed into the middle of two political campaigns. How did you gain the trust of the young men to be truthful with you?
It's a great question. It is one of the questions of the kind of work we do. I will say this is the first film about politics that we have made. There's certainly been great documentaries, great political documentaries made before, but they tend to be with one or the other side of a contest, and except for Robert Drew's Crisis, way back when. But so that was actually one of the ideas that was interesting to us, is that we would be seeing a race for governor from both parties' point of view. I think what we hadn't anticipated is that we weren't going to only be following the candidates, we were also going to be following the state party chairs, and how complicated a relationship that was. And that's a lot of story to tell, frankly. And we were a little, it took us a week to shoot this, but a year to edit it together, because well, you guys know better than I do, government's very complicated. And we also had 4 main characters who were all extraordinary. So gaining trust, though, I mean, you should talk about this because this is something that Jesse really has been doing for 20 plus years.
I think it's really a reflection of the 4 young men in the film, that they're so confident, so ambitious, so smart, but also vulnerable and open. I remember meeting Ben, and of course he had his Ronald Reagan doll on the bookshelf, but he also, remember I asked him about times where he changed his mind on an issue, and we talked about one issue, and I thought, you know, he's kind of firm in his beliefs, but he's also open-minded, and that I think that openness and that vulnerability, that willingness to kind of meet us in the middle in this process was what we were looking for. And I think all of these young men offered, and so I don't think we can take too much credit. It's really them who took the risk to let us into their lives and their journeys, and they still are doing that, and I think kind of processing what this experience has meant to them. And so we think they're the best ambassadors for this film, and it's been really kind of a joy to be on this journey with them. And I think that they embody sort of the leadership that we're hungering for. I think, you know, we saw that from your husband, Mrs. McCain, and from you, Governor Hogan. People, you know, you're not orthodox, and you know, putting country first is what you value. And I think, unfortunately, for a lot of young people, looking at the adult leaders that they see on the national stage sometimes are not embodying those principles. And so I think the question we're asking is, you know, where is that leadership going to come from? And we need to find it in more places.
Right.
And that's why Ben had that Ronald Reagan doll. You know, I had that same doll. I was pretty impressed, Ben, with that. Those dolls were still around, and that you had one. But, you know, remember Reagan did such a good job. He had a hopeful, positive vision for the future, but he had that great relationship with Tip O'Neill, the Speaker of the House, and they got things done and worked together, and they were friendly, even though they disagreed on issues. That's another example of what we're not seeing today in either party.
For sure. I think Jesse and Amanda are way too humble about the role that they had in building trust. And I think one of my favorite experiences through the process is, you know, they've been nothing but kind, warm, and welcoming. And, you know, even when nothing is going on with the documentary, even when they're not asking for, you know, me to dedicate time, even when there's, you know, no transaction or anything involved, you know, they're always willing to call. They're always willing to talk. Like, they're truly invested in my co-stars and myself as people and not just subjects. And yeah, I mean, they took a real interest in us as students and as, you know, young, politically minded, you know, teenagers. And they appreciate the complexity, and they're just very real. And I always love answering the phone to them. So that helps a lot, that they've been beyond generous and beyond welcoming through all of this, when it would be very easy for them to be like, you know, you should be grateful to be in our film, but that's not.
They don't act like Hollywood types, do they?
No.
Hollywood's pretty far from where we're sitting.
Well, I have one last question, Governor Hogan, and then one for all of you, if I may. Governor, during this documentary, one candidate tried to win more votes by pivoting his election platform to match his perception of the public opinion, but was outvoted because he was seen as insincere. What do you think this says about the importance of values and character-driven leadership in the democratic process?
I don't think there's anything more important than that. And I thought the film that film showed that very well. And it was a very good lesson to learn. It's something that I think we're lacking in much of today's politics. But I went through this as an example quickly. When I ran for governor in the bluest state in America, we'd only elected one Republican in 50 years. I'm only the second Republican in the whole history of the state to be reelected ever in 243 years. But when I ran in my state, which has very few Republicans, you know, I had primary opponents who were they were more to the right. People would change. They say one thing in the primary, and then they switch and try to pivot and go back and say something different in the general. I told every voter, whether they were a Republican, a Democrat, or independent, exactly what I believed. And I think people in today's politics, because there's not much of it, they really value sincerity and directness, and they're really frustrated and tired of political spin from a lot of our elected folks, people running for office on both sides of the aisle. And what they really value is just giving the straight answers and focusing on the issues and the problems, and not trying to pivot back sell one thing to one group and one thing to another. And I think that
Right.
the film showed that it didn't pay off, right? People saw through it.
Well, I think too in all of this, it's one thing to tell people what they want to hear, and it's another thing to tell them what they need to hear, and the latter is much harder to do. Having watched my husband do that, he was always a straight talker, and it was a good thing to do, but it was tough sometimes. It really was. Okay, last question to all of you. I want to leave on a positive note. After watching Boys State, what message do you want to convey to people about getting involved in politics and serving causes greater than themselves? I'll open it up.
I can start. Study history. Study all of history. I think it is very, very easy. And one of the reasons we have such a big political divide today is because, both sides to varying extents are only selectively studying our nation's history. And I think it's very easy to pick and choose the parts of our history you want to look at to present whatever narrative you're looking to present. But if you study all of our history and you do so with an open mind, but also with the recognition that, our nation was founded on the principles of liberty, justice, and equality for all, you're going to find that, we've made mistakes in the past. It hasn't always been perfect. We've always been growing, but the fact that we've been able to grow and achieve so much is a reason for optimism.
Yeah.
And I think a very concrete knowledge of history and, a knowledge of how our country has overcome struggles in the past and how we can overcome them today and, what strategies we need to use to do that is immensely beneficial to, any involvement in politics at all, no matter what side of the aisle you fall on.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I couldn't.
Amanda? Oh, go ahead, please, Governor.
We'll let Amanda and Jesse wrap it up. I just want to say I agree with everything that Jesse just said, and it's critically important. First of all, I think Jesse should be running for governor and not just party chair because he's a great,
Good.
But I think that, and I mentioned this at the beginning of the show. I just think that I'm incredibly hopeful because of watching the film and seeing these young people on both sides, so that both parties and both sets of views, that there are young people that are taking our democracy seriously, that are studying history, that are looking at how do we improve the political process. And to me, that's one of the most encouraging things. I'm like a lot of people in America, very frustrated with the state of our politics and completely fed up with it. But it's hard to imagine, think of it in a positive way, because people say, how are we ever going to fix it? Mm-hmm. I think this film showed that the next generation gives us something hopeful to look forward to, and that they maybe can help us fix it.
Thank you. Amanda, Jess, last word?
I'm also thinking about Stephen Garza in our film, who's the young man from Houston, a child of undocumented immigrants who comes to Boys State with a very progressive politics, but manages to find connection and find his voice and find support from an unlikely group, a more conservative, predominantly white group. And I think the way he does that is by listening, empathy, reaching across and being open-minded. And I think, Ben's leadership is impressive and we've celebrated it. But I think Stephen's model too is inspiring to me about how we should all kind of conduct ourselves in listening and a politics of empathy and compassion. And I think what we see in Boys State is that's a path to success too. Mm-hmm. So that's the takeaway.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Not to take anything away from Ben, but I was so impressed with Stephen, the way he reached out and the way he spoke, and he talked about winning over people in the other party, and that's sort of I'm coming from a different side of the middle, right of center rather than left of center. I agree with everything Stephen said about reaching out and trying to improve the politics. So both parties, I think, did an incredible job.
For sure, and I would be remiss, I would be remiss to take all the credit myself. I echo everything said about Stephen, and as I've come to know him, since the documentary's come out, I've been blown away by him. I think Robert's candidness and honesty in the end, and Renee Otero's boldness and willingness to say something controversial, but to say it with firmness and conviction. Those are both qualities that I also respect immensely about him.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
Well, thank you all. And may I say, Ben, you're a remarkable young man. I look forward to seeing you in your first campaign.
Thank
And wish you all luck, and keep doing what you're doing, because you are the future of this country. You and the young men and women that you work with and go to school with. And to all of you, thank you so much. This was wonderful, and what a great film, Amanda and Jesse, you've done. It's just wonderful. I'm so glad you did it.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Mrs. McCain and Governor Hogan. Thank you. It's an honor.
Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Absolutely.